Hi, Sam. It's Carol Roth, and I am responding to your interview questions. So I'm going to answer these in sequential order. First question is, your website says Carol has provided frank, straightforward, and insightful business advice to hundreds of business owners ranging from a single entrepreneur with an idea to Fortune 500 businesses. How did you find your voice and establish credibility so that you could speak frankly and people would respond favorably? And I think that's a great question, Sam. From my standpoint, I spent a long time garnering the expertise. I spent 16-plus years of actual work, and with the number of hours that I work per week, it's probably at least 20-plus years in calendar years, working with a broad range of businesses. And so, from my standpoint, having this entire spectrum of businesses to draw from really allowed me to gain experience. I've raised over $1 billion in capital. I've done $750 million in mergers and acquisitions. I've designed $1 million customer loyalty programs. I've done licensing and joint ventures with companies like Disney and Paramount and the pop singer Katy Perry. So those types of experiences really all came together to give me my own toolkit to draw from. In terms of finding my voice, that's a very interesting question because I've always been very straightforward, and when I started out as a corporate investment banker, my personality wasn't necessarily the best suited for that path because I tend to be a little bold and provocative and outrageous, which isn't typically what you think of in corporate finance. It did set me apart, and it did get me promoted, but I just didn't feel like it was the most natural fit where I was going to be the most successful. So I kept, looking and evaluating different options to find where I felt like I would provide the best fit. And sometimes the market just tells you what to do. And because so many people from corporate finance days, up through today had sought advice from me, I knew that using my toolkit to provide advisory was going to be a sweet spot for me. So that's number one. Second question is, I've heard the phrase, know your gig and stick to it. What are the benefits of a wide range of experience and expertise as opposed to being excellent and knowledgeable about a couple of areas? And I think that's an amazing question, and I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think it's important to have a broad range of experience to draw from if you're going to be in an area like giving advice. But at the same time, it's also important to master and have core competencies that really set you apart. And I think particularly in today's day and age, it's really critical to know what your core competencies are and to focus on a couple of things and do them very well than trying to be everything to everyone. That being said, if you're trying to give advice to people, which is very different than necessarily very different than pursuing one product or one good or one service, if you're going to give advice, you have to have a wide range of experience, because otherwise, if you've had one particular experience, you have nothing to benchmark that against. And that's my problem with a lot of people in the business advisory and small business space who've done something once, maybe twice, and they feel like their way is the be-all, end-all, not realizing that there are a whole slew of circumstances that tend to vary based on timing, based on your situation, your goals, your industry, your size, all kinds of things that affect it. So I do think it's important to have that breadth of experience if that's where you're going to land. But for most people, it still is really critical to be a master of some sort of domain, something that you can do better than anyone else, because unfortunately being a Renaissance man or woman or a Jack or Jill of all trades is very difficult to explain and even harder to execute on, and is not really particularly valued, at least in today's market. Final question is, on your website, there is tons of help and hope for people starting their dream journeys, particularly entrepreneurs. Your book, The Entrepreneur Equation, poses the question, could I be an entrepreneur? And also, should I be an entrepreneur? briefly, is there an entrepreneur type, or is each entrepreneur different? And I think, again, really good question. I think that there is a type of personality that is more suited for entrepreneurship. I have a little test that I call, are you Santa Claus or are you an elf? And I always say it takes one Santa Claus to come up with a vision for Christmas and a bunch of elves to help him execute. And so if you're somebody who does have that vision, who can, take the ball and run with it, who can wear a bunch of different hats, who can solve problems, if Rudolph gets sick, you find a goat, you put some antlers and a nose on him, and, off your sleigh goes. If you're that kind of a person, you're going to be more suited for entrepreneurship than what I call the elves, who sit around and wait for Santa to give them direction, and then they do a specific task or a couple of specific tasks very well. They're both really important to the success of Christmas, but they have very different functions. And if you don't like to take risks, if you like to be behind the scenes, if you're somebody who's not a visionary, if you really want the instruction, then you're more of an elf and you really aren't well suited to be an entrepreneur. And that's perfectly fine. It's really important that there are elf types as well, or else nobody would have anyone to work in their businesses. That being said, even though you can use that as kind of a litmus test, everyone has a different path to being successful, and there are different types of entrepreneurs that have been successful bringing different skills and competencies to bear. So it's not that narrowly focused, but definitely if you're an elf, you don't want to be an entrepreneur. So those are the answers to my questions, or to your questions, I should say. I hope that was helpful, and look forward to connecting with your readers.